So, a lot of the last, I suppose, 25, 30 years here, the story has been, the growing opportunities in China, and the FTA obviously made it a immensely easier place for New Zealand to do business and prosper in. But a lot of the talk now is of India's emergence and growth, and of course very much known for its huge technology firms, its biotech, a lot going on. What would you anticipate the level of opportunity for New Zealand in India to be?
Well, it's going to be a slow burn, I think. So there's many reasons to be confident in India. It's just become the largest country by population, 1.4 billion and growing. So it's overtaken China, and with reasonably strong demographics, at least over the next few decades. Its headline GDP growth rates are 6% plus. It's one of the fastest growing economies in Asia, particularly of that size. So, there's a lot that's going right for India at the moment. It certainly has a sense of confidence. It's attracting more FDI. Apple, for example, and other fairly sophisticated players are moving production into India, both to serve the Indian market as well as to de-risk aspects of their operations from China and elsewhere. And as you say, it's got a large and growing middle class. But of course, India, despite all of those kind of intrinsics, which look positive, is a difficult market to penetrate. We've had very long-standing FTA negotiations with India, as have many other countries, and failed to get it across the line because India is just difficult to get things across the line. Agriculture is particularly problematic for India as well because it has a domestic agriculture sector that it is keen to protect. So I think India should be on our country radar screens as well as on the radar screens of individual New Zealand corporates. But it is a tricky market to penetrate. But that said, if you just look at the numbers, it very much should be on our list. And there's New Zealand, if you like, has is in a privileged position. We've got long-standing relationships from Edmund Hillary to the soft power associated with cricket and the like. So there's many reasons that New Zealand is in a good position with India. But I think it's one of those markets that just takes sustained, ongoing investment to crack. It's not going to be a kind of explosive growth profile in the way that China was 15, 20 years back. I think it's going to be a much more gradual process. But it's if New Zealand can get it right, there's a big upside.
Mm. Well, what about our old friends in the United States? Clearly, still a hugely important global economy. One we've never cracked an FTA with either, notwithstanding a great deal of effort. There were great hopes, of course, for the TPP, which then got literally torpedoed, and they're still not in the renamed comprehensive partnership. Nonetheless, the US economy often surprises and continues to be one of some opportunity for us, despite not having the open access that we would like. What's your expectations of how we would fare in that market going forward?
Well, I think the US is a very attractive market, and it's growing remarkably well. I mean, the Q3 GDP numbers that came out a week or so back, 4.9%. So, at or about Chinese growth rates. So, it's not going to stay there. It's going to come off a little bit. But the US, continues to surprise. It's had a very, very strong recovery from the pandemic. So, despite very obvious political dysfunction, the US economy keeps on keeping on. I think Mr. Biden has actually done a very strong job in terms of economic management. I don't think he gets the credit for that, but I think he and his team have done a good job. I think the outlook for the US remains positive. They've got enormous strengths around technology. AI is the most recent reminder of US technological leadership. The industrial policy initiatives they are launching around semiconductors or green, are attracting very substantial amounts of capital into the US. And so I think the US is on a roll. I think there are many intrinsics that are positive. And you look at New Zealand's export profile. Exports into the US are growing reasonably strongly across a whole array of categories, from commodities through to services. So I think the US, for New Zealand as for many others, remains a very attractive market. I think it's cementing its status as the #1 economy in the world. And as an aside, going back to my observations on China earlier, I think that the prospect of China overtaking the US to become the #1 economy in the world by GDP, I think we should all be pushing that date back significantly. I think the US is on a roll, and China is beginning to run into some heavier weather. So I think the US, in a sense, is a very attractive market, obviously a market with which New Zealand has much in common in terms of values and norms and sort of cultural touch points and the like. But of course, the big risk factor around the US, and there are some economic risks to be sure, but the big risk factor is really political in nature. I think the domestic political risk profile of the US is substantial. If you look at the very untidy process around appointing a new speaker to the House, you have to think ahead to the elections in about a year's time, presidential elections in a year's time in the US, with the quite remarkable prospect of Mr. Trump getting a second term. That could do enormous damage to the US, both domestically, but also certainly to US standing in the world. But I think, just sort of drawing back from that, one observation that I would make is that although Mr. Biden and the first Trump administration are obviously very different animals in terms of professionalism and the absence of psychodrama and the like, there's also been quite significant measures of continuity between the two in terms of substantive policy. So you mentioned free trade agreements. Mr. Trump pulled out of what was then the TPP, but the current administration has no interest at all in signing FTAs with anybody. In fact, it seems quite opposed to the notion of trade reform at all. Mr. Biden is, if anything, more hawkish on China than an already hawkish Mr. Trump. Industrial policy, made in America, America first, protectionism, these are all hallmarks in Mr. Biden's administration as much as they were of Mr. Trump. So although I think a second Trump administration or a Trump lookalike second administration will be deeply damaging, I think the other thing to remember is actually in substantive policy terms, there has been significant continuity between the two. And so at least some of the differences, some of the risk factors are more kind of optical, more about the nature of US relationships with the world. There will also, I think, be quite significant measures of continuity between the two administrations. But yes, there's risk written all over the US at the moment.
Yeah,